I just figured it would be a good idea to sort of contrast and compare just the Kingsguard of Aerys Day and the Kingsguard that we are, met with at the beginning of Game of Thrones. I mean, I can go through them real quick, and then if anyone has any,
Sure.
stuff they wanted to say, or this chapter basically is where we get a lot of the R plus L equals J stuff from. And I mean, I didn't pick up on any of it the first time through. I was just so excited to have a flashback scene where I got answers to some things and some more characters that I hadn't heard of before. Basically, King Aerys had Gerald Hightower was the Lord Commander who was killed at the Tower of Joy. Arthur Dane was there, along with Oswell Went, and they were both killed at the Tower of Joy.
All three of those guys are awesome.
Yes, they were. It seems like he kind of sent the best of the best, down south with to guard Lyanna, except for Barristan. So Barristan, Jonathan Darry, and Lewin Martell were all at the Trident, and Darry was killed, and Lewin Martell was killed by Lyn Corbray, I believe. And then we have Jaime Lannister, who everybody knows what he did. And Harlan Grandison died before Robert's Rebellion. He opened up the way for Jaime, but then Gwaine Gaunt died during the Defiance of Duskendale, and I don't know if he was replaced by someone.
He must have been replaced by Darry or Martell, because there's Hightower, Dane, Went, Martell, Darry, that's 5. Then Grandison / Jaime is 6, and Gaunt / Barristan is 7. So Barristan predates Gaunt because he's the one who rescued the dude during the Defiance, but
Right.
Went, Dane, or Darry or Martell must have replaced Gaunt. Because even if you change it so it's Jaime Harlan, you still have 8.
So basically, those guys, we all have Arthur Dane as like the biggest badass in the series. So many people love him, and it just seems like the Kingsguard has sort of had a pretty big fall from grace from King Aerys' day. Barristan Selmy takes over. He's probably the most honorable of everyone who's left. We don't really know much about Preston Greenfield because he's killed pretty early on at the riot in King's Landing. We have Jaime, Mandon Moore, Meryn Trant, Boris Blount, and Aerys Oakheart are the guys that fill it out in the current day.
Well, I think with the last 15 years or so, it's been peacetime. So the appointments have been major, or political, I should say. I think that's the main problem. And then the political people you have back in the time after the Lannisters for the most part, for Cersei, back in some.
Yeah, I feel like this chapter is kind of Ned lamenting the death of the Kingsguard. Like these were the last true knights of the Kingsguard. I mean, Barristan's still alive, but he kind of switched sides. And then everyone who's elected since then has been for, it seems, political reasons. Do this and we'll get your son on the Kingsguard or something. Like pretty much everyone on the Kingsguard. Maybe some of them are skilled fighters, but none of them are worthy of the Kingsguard. None of them have like the gallantry and the honor, and probably even the intelligence of the 7 that were under Aerys.
It's also sort of a parallel for the Night's Watch in the sense that just like with the Night's Watch, it's like this long, slow decline that sort of like eats away at the educated core. But with this, it's just this. There's only 7 people. It's this sudden event. I can't imagine there's ever been a period where you had that sort of brutal a blow to the Kingsguard. You lose 5 members. Only 2 people make it through, Barristan and Jaime. And Jaime's like 18, and Barristan does his best, but because he's a pardoned traitor, he doesn't really have any say. So
Do you think Jaime is partly responsible for the decline of the Kingsguard? The fact that he killed his king, that kind of besmirched the Kingsguard?
I think maybe, but at the same time, like, regardless of whether or not Jaime's redeemed himself, because, like, that's a whole different question, like, he's certainly beginning to redeem the Kingsguard again. Just by, like, enforcing the traditions and reading the book and being careful about stuff like that. Like,
I don't think anyone really knows about that. I think that's like an internal journey that we're privy to. But on the outside, he's very much still projecting this kind of, I'm Tywin's son, I'm ruthless, I'm the Kingslayer. He keeps emphasizing that, using that reputation to get good things done. Ultimately, it's that reputation that's prevailing. And if that's the message that's going out to the world about what the Kingsguard represents, it's not particularly honorable or noble or something you can aspire to as a knight.
Bad reputation is a hard thing to shake, even whether you deserve it or not.
And he's trading on that reputation.
Yeah. I will say, though, that, like, that's true, but at the same time, he is working to change sort of the internal stuff. So, like, if he can make a difference to Loras, and Loras ends up the next commander, or, like, if he purges eventually people like Blount, like, those are the sort of things that the Kingsguard can sort of rebuild from the inside, and eventually you'll have another commander like Jaime who respects the institutions, even if he's kind of an ass.
That's a good point. He might have a chance to rebuild it from the inside, and he could mentor knights like Loras and try and set them on the right path.
Yeah, I don't think it could really ever be fully redeemed until Jaime's not in it anymore, just because of his reputation.
Right.
I mean, how could, even if he has the 6 shiniest, most honest, knights of the realm, they have the Kingslayer as the charge of the King's Guard. Like, he needs to be out of there before that can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, and that's definitely true. But like, imagine if Jamie had left the Kingsguard or something, and Barristan leaves. Suddenly, the people you have on the guard are like
Cutthroats, basically.
right, like useless sellswords. And the thing is, at a certain point, it could take 50 or 60 or 100 years for it really to return. For all that Jamie is sort of like tainting it, he also does know what it was.
And if you remember the last the epilogue of A Dance to Dragons, how like Kevin is going through all the current members of the Kingsguard, and they're rubbish. Like Boris Blount can barely like stay on his legs; he's just kind of wobbling back and forth.
He can't fit in his armor anymore.
They're less than cutthroats. They're not even like as strong and proficient fighters as cutthroats. They're just a ruin of their former glory. There's a great line from Ned or Bran. Is like remembering something that his father said about how the Kingsguard was once a shining example to the world. It wasn't just this great group of knights. It was almost this example to everyone what knights could be. Like the idea of knighthood is a very sort of Westerosi idea, I guess. And that was the sort of thing that everyone aspired to. And once you lose that, I don't know, that ideology or that sort of that message, kind of everything falls down around it.
Yeah, I think that.
Sorry,
but also, like, Ned is notoriously he views the past through rose-tinted glasses. Like,
well, I mean,
right.
if you look at the current Kingsguard, it's like pretty bad.
Kingsguard's terrible.
In this instance, I think he's probably right.
Yeah, I think in this case he is right, but at the same time, like, I don't know, like Lewin Martell had a bunch of paramours, and sure, like that's just a violation. It's not like it's a violation, not really of the rules, but not of the spirit. But at the same time, like Ned doesn't think about that are true, are real things. Like the Kingsguard's been shitty before, and it'll be shitty again. Like Cole is the worst. Kristen Cole is the worst.
I think you're right. Like I think in this scene as well, you see the Kingsguard is not necessarily a good thing, even when it's the most noble knights in the realm. They're kind of bound to serve pretty evil causes by their oath. Jamie recalls hearing the Queen being abused and not being able to help them because they were bound by the Kingsguard oath, and it's not necessarily a good thing. Even if there are good people in it, they're almost sad having to. It's almost a sadness when he says, "We swore an oath. Like we don't actually want to kill you, Ned, or whatever. We have to do this."
Yeah, I wonder if King Aerys had ordered Sir Gerald Hightower to beat a 14-year-old girl. Do you think he would have done it?
Yeah.
The way Joffrey commanded, Boris Blunt to beat Thompson.
Well, I forget, was it Hightower when Jaime was standing outside the of King Aerys's chamber where he was basically raping his wife and they didn't stop it, and he said we it's our duty but not for him. We have to protect everybody but you can't protect them from him. Was that Hightower or was that someone else on the Kingsguard?
Darry, I think.
But even still, not protecting her and beating a girl.
Yeah, that's just how the vows conflict with each other, and it's not till Jaime works it all out after the fact that he's trying to do right by it. But it's like all the knightly vows, a lot of them conflict with each other.
How do you think Ned would respond to that? Like, not to, like, if he was on the Kingsguard. Though, like, who knows? Like, if Brandon had lived, like, he's a second son of a big house. He's a talented swordsman, if not the very best. Could have been a Kingsguard kind of dude, but, like, what do you think he would do if Jaime told him that story?
It's tough. It's a big what if because we don't know how much of the events of the last 15 years has formed Ned's personality. If he never had to take up his brother's place and to be the leader, he might have been happy being, playing second fiddle. But I'd like to think from what we know about him that he would do the right thing and he wouldn't allow it.
Is it a requirement to be a knight for, most of the history of the Night's Watch? I know Joffrey threw it out and put the Hound on there because Ned was never a knight, right? Because the Northerners don't. Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's right. They don't do that. I don't know.
I guess the idea of honor is kind of absolute. Like, it doesn't really matter if he's the king and he has power. If it's dishonorable, it's dishonorable for anyone. And I'd like to think, the Kingsguard, maybe they're not all like this, but some of them have to have, like, a head on their shoulders. They have to be able to speak and negotiate with the king the way Jaime sort of does and the way sort of Barristan sort of tries to do with Dany. And, they're not just, I guess, soldiers. They have a political voice, maybe, reason with the king, maybe, and try and protect people who don't deserve it. Like Aerys Oakheart kind of tries to protect Sansa. He fails because he's not that strong-willed, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, Lord Commander traditionally sits on the small council, right? So you would think it was a semi-political position.
I feel like the Kingsguard that were under Ares, they could have. I feel like they could have done more. Maybe trying to negotiate with Rhaegar, trying to fix this obviously horrible situation. But the fact that they just kind of said, just turned a blind eye. Basically, he does what he wants. We let him do it.
There's so much we don't know. Also, behind closed doors, as they said, that's probably a story they'll never get told. But I guess we have to go on what we're given, and they pretty much follow orders and the stuff we're given.
It's kind of the dilemma that Jamie lays out in book 2. Like we have all of these oaths, but they all contradict with each other. Obey your father, obey the king. What if the father hates the king? What if the king tells you to kill the small folk? It's kind of a impossible dilemma.
The Northerners kind of have a solution to that, which is that they're not they generally don't tie themselves into those nets of honor. What's more important to them, other than Ned, who's raised in the Vale, what's more important to them is more sort of duty. And it's sort of similar, but for them, they do what is sort of necessary or what is right or what they should do. Whereas and sometimes that means killing a shitty king, I would imagine. Whereas for someone in the Vale, it's more important to protect a shitty king who you swore to protect than it would be to do what is necessary for everyone to live through the winter. That's always been my read on the Flints and the Walls and all those dudes.
Yeah, I mean, they're a lot rowdier. You see the way Greatjon talks to Robb. There's a lot more room for sort of back talk towards your lord, and I guess maybe common sense can prevail in those situations where you're not always executed for giving any lip to a superior. Yeah, I guess there isn't as many oaths. It's more about, as you say, duty, stations, this is my station, rather than I will obey you absolutely because you're my political superior.
Yeah, it's definitely different, I guess. Yeah. That's why the people in the North and the people in the South sort of, I'm not going to say they don't like each other, but they definitely, there's a cultural divide there.
Yeah, it's something that we'll probably get more answers to as going forward, hopefully with the Worlds of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
But I mean, this chapter was great, not just because it has the Tower of Joy, but I really like how they contrasted basically the end of Robert's Rebellion with the beginning of the War of the Five Kings. You even have some of the characters saying the same lines, where Arthur Dane says, now it begins, and you have Robert saying it ends now, when we know it's nothing of the sort. So there's a little, foreshadowing with that. I just like how he did that, and I forgot how beautiful the writing is in this chapter, especially the first couple paragraphs. It's almost he's telling a fairy tale, the way that Ned says, I looked for you here, I looked for you there. It's like they're playing out their parts in a play before it actually starts.
Yeah, I love that. It's so Shakespearean.
Yeah, it's brilliantly crafted. I was just thinking, why didn't they use the tower? Since they were in a tower, wouldn't they be better off staying in the tower and firing crossbows or arrows at people coming up rather than going and standing there?
Maybe Jamie learned that crossbows were cowards looking for them.
Yeah, they wouldn't go down like that.
Yeah, I always thought they were they knew the war was basically over and they'd lost, and they were really just looking for an honorable way out. I mean, he's sitting there smiling, sharpening his sword, they knew this was the end. And if they were held up in the tower, it would have made for a much more. Maybe they would have killed them, but then what's their options if they win? Where do they go? What do they do with a baby and 3 Kingsguard?
Well, once the baby,
aside from a very funny comedy.
The war was lost at this point. Eris was dead. Their king was dead, right?
Yeah.
And didn't they have horses either? I'm assuming that the Northmen arrived on horses.
If they won, I bet they'd take the baby and go to see their dear friend, what's his face, in Bravos.
Yeah.
They can say as much as they want about not running away or bending their knees, but they're not just going to sit at the Tower of Joy till the baby gets murdered.
Okay, do we assume that John was already born, or did she die in childbirth? Right now. Because the question is, what were they doing there? They would be there to protect the heir apparent if he was already born, right?
I assumed that she gave birth in the tower, and she died shortly thereafter from the birth. But we don't really have. It's never conclusively said. I mean, I don't think she was murdered. That's what Robert thinks, but we know that's probably not true.
Yeah.
Well, he describes hearing her screaming Eddard as they're fighting, so maybe, I don't know, she went into premature labor or something from the stress or something.
I suppose, too, if she was that far along and could give birth at any moment, then the heir's going to be there soon. So maybe that's why they were there.
I mean, reading back, it is really odd the fact that he's laying out all these things. Why weren't you here? Why weren't you in King's Landing where you were supposed to be? Why weren't you in the Trident alongside Rhaegar? Why weren't you protecting the heir and the queen? Why are you in this 3 members of the Kingsguard, almost half the Kingsguard, protecting this random castle in the middle of dawn, so far away from the action. It's so, like, in hindsight, it's so weird that would happen.
If Rhaegar ordered them to protect her,
Yeah,
maybe.
like there's obviously something's going on. Like, obviously, R plus L equals J isn't confirmed, but there's just something so weird that happened here.
It's kind of weird if John wasn't born yet, then they wouldn't have known if it was going to be an heir or not, a boy or girl.
Like, if Rhaegar thought this wasn't just his son that needed protection, he had children in King's Landing that just as worthy of protection, but he actually thought this was like a prophetic birth.
Yeah.
Maybe this was something that the gods had ordained that needed protecting.
Maybe he was just really scared of something happening to the baby, and he thought, why send a doctor when I can send 3 useless Kingsguard?
They should have been scared for his kids in King's Landing.
I wonder if things might have turned out differently if those Kingsguard had been stationed elsewhere, maybe protecting Aerys and fighting alongside Rhaegar. Maybe the Targaryens might have not actually died and been wiped out.
Maybe.
Do you think they could have stood against Robert in full combat?
I suppose they had Martell leading the Dornish. Like, he was pretty good. And they had Barristan, and they still lost, so I don't know. I think Jaime's more the issue. Like, they might have protected Aerys, although I don't know if they could have stopped the Lannisters from getting in. And I guess it would have all gone up in flames if Aerys hadn't died, so yeah, probably not good.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing that they weren't in King's Landing, because it
Yeah.
would have come the other way.
Is it ever explained how they know that they're in the tower? Do we know? Let's assume they're hiding there. Is it ever explained how that they know, or how they find them, and why they only send sort of like 7 men rather than like a battalion or whatever?
I think it's 7 because they were trying to get there so quickly, and because maybe Ned suspected that like he had secrets that would need to be kept. I think that he knew is just like, you can't hide 3 members of the Kingsguard.
Yeah, but at the same time, he took 7 himself and 7 lords and highborn. You know, they didn't have any They didn't have any footmen. They didn't have any men at arms. It was just like 7 officers basically going to take on these guys. It seemed like almost they knew what they were getting into, but obviously, if they really knew, they would have brought more men.
So at least they're his most trusted people.
Wasn't Ned? Did Ned expect to see them there? Yeah, I think he knew Lyanna was there. Maybe he just thought Lyanna was there with some midwives or something.
Yeah, but how would he know? Like, is Rhaegar sending him letter, or did she get a raven out? Like, it's part of things. Like, I kind of don't want to know all these answers because it'll take away from the mystery and the aura that surrounds it. But at the same time, I do want to know. I just would love a timeline. It's like from this to this.
I don't think he knew about the pregnancy. I think he just knew. He suspected maybe that Lyanna went willingly with Rhaegar, and he didn't want everyone else to know about that because obviously the narrative Robert was perpetuating was that she was kidnapped, and that's pretty much the basis that he wrote against Rhaegar. But I assume he went to Storm's End, and then I guess that was the end of the war, and there was one last thing to do, which was to seek out Lyanna's body, whether she was alive or dead. So he went through Dawn and maybe just went through villages asking after information, and he just learned that the Kingsguard were holed up in this place called the Tower of Joy, so he just headed there.
Feasible.
Also, it seems like Rhaegar built the Tower of Joy. Is that what we're supposed to understand? Because it's never capitalized as the Tower of Joy. It's like he called it the Tower of Joy, and then Ned basically took it down. But we know, as far as we know, it wasn't like the seat of any house or like a strategic place. It was just this tower that Rhaegar had built there for some reason.
Maybe it's just some weird sex tree he had people build.
Yeah. Love list.
It seems like the kind of thing he would do.
Right?
Yeah, I wonder if he built it for Lyanna.
Yeah. Because who doesn't like a weird sex tower?
Gee, thanks, Rhaeg. It's a penis-shaped tower in the middle of nowhere. Thank you.
Oh, it's great. It's in the middle of a desert, and it's very different from where I grew up. I love it.
And it's like 1,000 degrees.
Thank you for bringing me to the land of your first wife's family, who presumably loved me a great deal.
Well, they're freaky down there. They're into it.
True.
Did you guys think there was anything symbolic about like the numbers, like 7 against 3? Like, 7 kingdoms, 3 heads of the dragon. I don't know. That was just something that stuck out to me.
No, I didn't think of that. I like that, though.
I thought it was kind of like the motif through it because it popped up 3 or 4 times, but I think that was just more going along with just the Shakespearean atmosphere of the chapter, how it was just like the chorus to the action that was happening. But it's it's great to always try to figure out theories and numbers, but anytime you try to get super specific, that usually falls short of reality.
This is one of normally when people talk about how Ned is too honorable and he ruins everything, I'm like, no, that's not true. But right here, why didn't you just show up with some bows and arrows? Like a crossbow Rex plate armor. They don't need to be like sword fighting with 3 of the greatest sword fighters in the realm. They could just snipe them at a distance.
Well, he respected them, I guess.
Yeah, like that's great. Like now, 5 of your best friends are dead. Great job.
That's the other thing that really I don't understand. Why didn't he take the bones of his 7 or his 6 most trusted people back to be buried in the north?
I think he only had room for 1 corpse, and he wanted to bring back his sister.
Selfish.
Yeah, and this is basically, I mean, if you go far enough ahead, this is the beginnings of the whole why Lady Dustin hates Ned, because he got her husband killed, and
Well, there are
that's,
a lot of
there's a
problems.
lot of repercussions from what happens here, where Ned didn't see any of this coming.
I think there's problems with the Glovers too, and the Risewells. Yeah, because the Risewell, isn't she a Risewell, and her husband was Lord Dustin, so like she's doubly mad.
Yeah, she got her. Yeah, exactly. And she was only married for 6 months, and then they never had any kids after that. So
Yeah, and
she's been a widow for the last 15 years.
And there's all those issues with the Glover, or no, there aren't issues with the Glovers, but like you can always use more people.
I'm sure he could have arranged to have their bones taken up. Like he stopped in Starfall for a couple of months, didn't he? Could have sent some people back with cards.
Yeah, the timeline is very confusing. I want to learn more about that.
Yeah, I think it is.
The other weird thing is like, it seems like the only people who survive this are Ned and Howland. So they're the only people who know what actually occurred at the Tower of Joy. But I'm not sure if it's this chapter or another chapter, he describes like holding Lyanna and that they had to like pull him off her. So there was more than one person at the Tower of Joy. I'm not. Who do you guys think that was?
Probably Howland.
Well, so more than Howland.
Well, maybe she just had some attendants or midwives or something.
Some wet nurses, yeah, maybe.
Maybe there actually were a ton of small folk and men at arms, but since it's just all about the lords, they're just not mentioned. There's actually hundreds of people
kill
there.
Them all?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think they'd have to have some kind of female attendants, wouldn't you, really? Like you say. Midwives. Maybe Wyler.
Yeah, from Starfall, like Dane could have brought her up or something.
Yeah, and this is where you get more mystery about the Sword of the Morning and Dawn. But I also was shocking lack of knowledge. I always thought it was a Valyrian sword, just because it was such a badass sword. But apparently it's not. It was made from like a meteorite thousands of years ago. So I did not know that until I started looking it up.
Might even predate Valyria if they're the first men.
Yeah.
Isn't meteoric iron like cool because it's somehow like it's like steel? It's better steel somehow because of space. I read that somewhere, and I don't know if it's
You're talking about in real life?
Yeah, like because it's meteoric iron.
I don't know. I've never heard of anybody actually trying to make anything out of meteorite.
This may be something I made up in my head.
Space steel sounds real to me.
I heard another fantasy stories. I think I heard like Excalibur or something that's supposed to be made from meteorite in one legend or something.
Also, I was just on Tumblr, and the A Song of Ice and Fire video about Tower of Joy just popped up, which is funny, weird. A Song of Ice and Fire University just reblogged it, so clearly they can tell we're recording.
Absolutely.
It's probably all the traffic from us like reading about it. Like, this is popular. Let's post an article about that.
All right, yeah, let's rank our guards.
Yeah, I just figured do like all time from ones that we've actually seen on the page. I mean, there's a lot that have mentioned, like Prince Aemon and Dragon Knight and all that, but we haven't seen them yet. But we've got a lot from the prequels and the Dunk and Egg stories. But did you guys have a favorite all time and a worst all time?
Are we talking about just strictly fighting skills, or just like personal favorites as characters?
It could be either. Like, who's the best at what he does, and who you'd want to protect you or your kids.
Oh, I've got to go for Arthur Dane. I just really like the sound of him.
How do you think the Hound would rank against some of these guys, like some of these old guys in the straight up fight?
I want Jaime there. Jaime's a good swordsman. Like, sure, he's an asshole, but like, I'm gonna say Jaime.
Good swordsman now.
Oh, true. But like, he is in Ares time. I'm gonna say Jaime, Barristan, and let's say Arthur Dane because he has a cool sword. Those are my 3 top picks.
Yeah, I like Dane because the stuff he did with the Kingswood Brotherhood, he managed to like get the small folk like rights and things, and that actually disarmed the Brotherhood of all their support. I thought that was pretty clever. So he has like a good head on his shoulders as well as being like really gallant and chivalrous and all that. And he sounds like a pretty badass fighter. I like Barristan too. Just like, I mean, he's a bit, I don't know, he changed sides a bit too frequently, but I guess he's kind of forced into that. But it's the stuff we see in Meereen, I kind of liked the way he comported himself, organizing down. He's not just a soldier. He has a head on his shoulders. He managed to maintain stability in the city. He didn't let it just turn to chaos. Maintained Daenerys's power seat by forming that council.
Yeah, for someone who's like he's got the reputation as being this proud and noble and honorable guy, he actually does bend a lot, and he's managed to survive like the worst stuff that he could possibly go through as a Kingsguard. I mean, and he's still standing at the other end of it. And
But I think that you need that flexibility. Like if you're
Yeah.
just stalwart obedience, you're probably going to be told to do some pretty horrible things. But if you can maneuver around and negotiate with superiors and be flexible and be able to bend your honor a little bit, like Davos, you can
yeah, but I
probably
don't
end
think
up.
he thinks he's flexible. Like we know he is, but like even if you like, he'd be like, no, I'm not. I've served, But it's like he has had to change sides and to make some tough decisions on his own without that weren't orders. That stuff he had to come up with.
Yeah. I'm definitely keeping Barristan in. You guys have further convinced me of that. But I might swap Lewin Martell for Arthur Dane. Just because, like, you might want someone who's good with, like, a spear to, like, round out your 3. And also, he's clearly a decent general because he was the one in charge of the Dornish levies. So, like...
But he lost.
Yeah. Part of the reason he lost was that, like, there were issues with morale, like... If the Lannisters had sided with them and, like, they were a little less outnumbered, like...
Morale is the big thing, yeah.
Yeah, because, like, the Dornish are all really grumpy because their families are being held kidnapped by Aris. So, like, I don't know if he's that... I think he's probably a pretty solid general.
And the North and the Stormlanders, and I mean, they're actually passionate. They're actually, even if they don't have the numbers, they're all united in this one goal. Their enthusiasm, I guess, for lack of a better word, overpowers the kind of obedience the other soldiers. They're just doing what they want. They probably don't even believe in the cause they're fighting for, but they have to.
And if we've learned anything from the Princess and the Queen, it's that you do not want to fight a bunch of angry Northerners. Because those dudes are scary.
Berserkers.
They take time to get roused, but once they're roused, they're trouble. Yeah, I didn't know if we should include Dunk in this because we haven't seen him on page as a Kingsguard, but from everything that we know of him, his time being forged into what he eventually becomes, we know he becomes Lord Commander, and he's very well respected.
He uses a few fights from what we've seen.
He does, but you're in his head, he knows he doesn't think too much of himself, but when he does choose to stand up, he really stands up for the right reasons, and I really respect that.
Wait, we're talking about Dunk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's also, like, still only, like, 21 or something in the books we're reading. Like, he has time to sort of stop just, like, drowning people and get a little better at the actual sword play.
But just the fact that he rose so high, and I remember when we were reading The Prince of the Queen, we were trying to figure out if there had been other, like, not, baseborn Lord Commanders, and there have been a couple, but it seems like Duncan was very well respected and was, the exception to the rule. So he must have been very good at what he did, considering where he got to.
Was there there were bastards on the Kingsguard, but were there any small folk? Because Dunk's an actual small folk.
Right, I know, that's what we couldn't figure out, because it was just the two. There were two bastards, I believe.
But they're probably noble if they have a bastard name.
Exactly, yeah. Not Lord Smith of Flea Bottom, nothing like that. And I mean, we all can almost universally agree that Kristen Cole is one of the worst Kingsguard ever. No matter what reason if he was a spurned lover or if he was just hungry for power. But from the first time I read Princess and the Queen, I was like, really? This is how it starts? He just gets up and cuts the guy's throat and starts it? Like, who the hell is this guy?
This is on.
This is on, yeah. And when he finally died, I was so happy, but it didn't really solve anyone's problems.
Although to be fair, I mean, we see in the Rogue Prince, you kind of have to make a decision. I mean, they're both pretty bad choices, but it's either the blacks or the greens, and I don't think the greens show themselves to be particularly worthy of the throne.
No, they're all awful.
Well, they were like
in Cole's defense. I would say someone like the modern Kingsguard, like Blount or Trant, because they're just thugs. Like they don't even. At least Cole, I don't know, there's some kind of belief system there, maybe. I don't know if it's from being a spurn lover, or maybe he generally didn't want Daemon on the throne, but at least he could lead an army, whereas, Blount and Trent, they're just useless. They're just horrible people that have been given a white cloak.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the TV show that's like tinted my image of Meryn Trant, because when I first read the books, I hated Boris Blount more than anything, just because he had the little remarks and he was a real coward at heart. But since Trant is the only one on the TV show that we really see aside from Jaime, it's like that's all been put on Meryn Trant, and I realized how awful he was, and now I hate Trant more than anybody.
Well, Blount gave up Tommen to.
I know, he's like, I'm out, tap out, I'm out,
Tommen.
guys, you can have him. And
How the hell are you going to reinstate someone like that to the Kingsguard? That's insane.
Well, just because he was Cersei's toady, that's why she wanted him back, right?
Yeah. The Lannister is probably the most to blame for the fall of Kingsguard, Cersei and Jaime. But hopefully Jaime can bring some class back to it if he survives.
Yeah, I hope Balon Swan doesn't get killed in Dorne, because I know that a lot of people think that's going to happen, and that's going to be like a...
Well, isn't Swan helping Cersei? I mean, I guess it depends on whether you believe the Tristan plot, but wasn't he in on that?
Well, aren't they
'Cause he, like,
that he's going there to
He
kill
gets a bit
Trystane?
antsy. And he gets a bit antsy when Doran suggests they travel by sea rather than land, and he gets, oh, wait. Because the plot is to kill them as they're traveling by land.
Right.
From the chapter in Dance of Dragons,
Okay, I read them all.
Areo notices that Swan
Areo
hesitates.
notices. That's what his chapters are all about. Areo notices.
Noticing, that's his, like, modus operandi.
Yeah,
I think isn't Swan conflicted about his orders? I think I read that.
I've got to do a
Is
read.
he? Yeah, I'm all rusty to me too. Well, I think if I had to go with three, they're not all the same time period, but Sir Gerald Hightower, Sir Arthur Dane, and the Hound would be a pretty badass trio. Because I think our image of the Hound has been a little tainted by the show. Because the book Hound, he's on par with Jamie. Jamie thinks, he's not sure if he can take them. But even when Jamie's in his top form.
I guess the Hound you'd want to protect
Just
someone.
for muscle.
You wouldn't really, you wouldn't really send him out to do things. But if you said you protect this person with your life, that person would be pretty safe.
Yeah.
Although I guess if they use fire, that's like his kryptonite. If everyone found out about that, it'd be like, shoot fire arrows at him when he's down. Meek as a kitten.
And I think something has to be said for Harlan Grandison, just because he made it and he died peacefully in his sleep. Doesn't that mean he must have done something right? Or he might have just been appointed when he was old. I don't know. But I kind of like the fact that all they remember about him is that he had a sleeping lion and that he died in his sleep. But I'll give him some kudos. He didn't get killed and he didn't disgrace himself, as far as we know.
I don't know for a Kingsguard, they probably suck to die in your sleep.
I just mean he's great for like a person in the Middle Ages time for making it and dying in his sleep.
Yeah. So rare.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, maybe being kind of a quiet, unnamed member of the Kingsguard's a good deal.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of adequate members over the years that did their duty and then died that they're not named. You only remember the songs and the people wrote the songs about the memorable characters, but
Yeah.
not that they're small folk on the Kingsguard. You're obviously a lord or something, but it's I'm sure there was more. We just don't know. We don't have a lot of information. It's part of the one of the great things about these books is that we can care so much about them without a lot of information, but it's also a drawback. That's why I hope we're getting. I hope there's like 5 pages in the Worlds of Ice and Fire that just like list the kings and there's their Kingsguard, and then we can have all these additional information from those.